Hey there, welcome to the Eurostep Podcast Network Game 3 post-game Bucks Bulls, and you can probably already hear that we are in a better mood this time around. That is because the Bucks just walloped the Chicago Bulls. 111-81 was the final score. I actually think that makes it seem closer than it was throughout most of this game. The Nastas checked in with nearly 9 minutes left in the fourth quarter, which really says a lot about this game of basketball. No offense to Thanasis or Rohan, but I am joined by the Winning Six crew, Adam McGee and Jordan Treske, to talk about Milwaukee's much needed comeback game and the Winning Six merch, which looks amazing on Jordan right now. If you're not listening on YouTube, hop on over there and then hop on over and cop some merch. But first, let's hop over to you guys. Fellas, how's it going?
Going well. It's going better than it was last time, at least.
Sorry, it was just funny to go from we're just buoyant, and it's going well. It's going well.
I'm not carried away at anything. I mean, a lot of excitement. That's great. You guys can be carried away. I'm not. I'm definitely on the more pessimistic side overall, still with everyone. But this is, this is better. This is what we want to see, no matter what's going to come in the days and weeks ahead. This was needed. So I'm feeling good, but I'm not getting carried away because they beat the crap out of a team that they really should be beating the crap out of.
Agree there. Let's get the injury update out of the way now, and then we can dive into what we actually saw. So Khris Middleton, I still don't think there's been any actual report on what the grade MCL sprain is. We knew it was an MCL sprain. It's pretty much got to be grade 1, it seems like. Khris is talking about 2 weeks. Wait, you're shaking your head at him.
No, based on and this is a dangerous game because it's based on what the Bucks have said.
That too.
But based on their own press release, based on Woj's reporting in particular, which seems to be the one that came true with the most details, they're reevaluating in 2 weeks, and I'm not surprised that Khris is taking that as he wants to play in 2 weeks. Whether he's able to play in 2 weeks, I would still say is way up in the air. Even a best case could still be just a bit beyond that. But I mean, positive sign that he's with the team. I know it's not a long journey to have to make, but that he's with the team, he's on his feet and that kind of thing. But I don't want to get into. I would rather be really pleasantly surprised if 2 weeks comes around and the reevaluation is, oh look, he's cleared and he's ready to go and playing then. I just can't imagine that being the case. 2 weeks from now, the good news could be he's only a week away, and that could be something we'd all take pretty happily. Although that is challenging at that kind of point. But I don't know about that. I'm not surprised Khris is hearing reevaluated in 2 weeks and being like, yeah, I want to play in 2 weeks.
And I should say, I misspoke a little bit. I don't think Khris said playing in 2 weeks. I think Khris was asked directly, I believe by Eric Name in the Pool Reporter, his availability, if he would play in the second round. And he said, yes, I plan on playing. And again, of course, Khris is going to be optimistic about this. So I don't know if he actually spoke about the 2 weeks. I should clarify that. The timelines, they are somewhat similar. He'd have to be back in not too much longer than 2 weeks to play in the second round. But it's hopeful. I guess it's easier to be hopeful after a game like this, but it seems like Khris and the Bucks are trying to be as well, which is, what we expected, what we should have expected after how they handled Giannis going down last year. But it's nice to see nonetheless.
Well, what we know is it's not grade 3.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what we do know for sure. And I know in anything that I have read, a lot of it then depends on, is there any kind of bone bruises? Is there anything else around that? Let's hope not. Let's hope it all comes back.
The Bally Sports Wisconsin broadcast noted that he was wearing a brace.
I've heard that because playoffs, you get back from stuff earlier. I hear, this is from one of the many internet doctors. I'm sorry, I don't remember which one, but there's a chance that being aggressive with the timeline, he may play with one for the first few games back. So we'll have to monitor that and see how that goes.
Play with a brace? I'm trying to think of seeing anyone play. I mean, he'll play with probably countless supports, and Khris Chris
Did
is someone
Giannis
who's
play
been
with the
doing that anyway.
Giannis played with the brace. No, he famously said he didn't want to. That's right.
Yeah, they made him the
they-
special brace, and he said no.
He said no after his hyperextension line.
I feel like big men.
Most knee braces are like there's a difference between knee brace and knee support, which can often be like the sleeve. Braces are designed to restrict movement for stability. So playing in a brace would be very challenging. And no disrespect to Khris, I don't think we need Chris's movement restricted any further.
I was going to say, I don't know if there's anyone who could just be like, yeah, it's actually fine. Not noticing much of a difference at all. Okay, we're not doctors. We don't have any more.
We're not. The doctor's off tonight. Off duty.
The doctor's off tonight. But Dr. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was in, very much in, and Grayson Allen. So I think those guys in particular are going to be a big focus. But we should start with Bobby, who, Rohan, you threw this in our group chat, said maybe it'll be Bobby. Maybe they want the offense. It was
Jordan, you mean?
What did I say?
You said Rohan. That's nice after you ditched him a couple of pods ago. You're now pining for him when he's not here.
I'm making up for lost time.
That's a sweet moment.
Yeah. But no, Jordan threw that in because I don't think we really even discussed this on our last pod because we didn't know if he was going to be available, right? I mean, you never know if he's got a concussion. We didn't think concussion, but the eye issue, whatever it was, he was pretty soon after that pod, like the next day, confirmed like he's off the injury report. He will play. He will wear the goggles. And then he gets the start, I guess technically it's small forward, which is kind of hilarious. And from right away, he was a bucket. And you really wanted to see that, of course. We talked about how important scoring is with Khris out. But I've got to say, before I throw it to you guys, the rebounding has always been such a big thing for me with Bobby. And seeing him come down with nearly as many boards as points. He has 18 points, 16 boards, 1 turnover, 7 for 14 from the field, 4 for 8 from deep. That's like the scoring was essential, but rebounding is going to be so big for his minutes. It was awesome to see him lead the Bucks and have like more than double of anybody else on the team. I mean, he destroyed the glass in this game.
It's fun being out there with Giannis and Brook Lopez.
Yeah.
That I think that certainly helps. It's going to clear a lot of room for you to just be the guy who goes and crashes the boards. Bobby certainly has the energy, and he did a great job of that. Jordan, you mentioned the Bally Sports Wisconsin broadcast. I assume you were watching there. I don't know, Ty, were you on ABC or were you on the local broadcast either? But on ABC, it was in the first half of the reporting, and maybe I just missed this from whether it came from just general media availability or anything today, but hearing Bobby talk about what he was experiencing after he hit in the eye in the last game, so that basically he was blacked out in terms of vision in that eye, and then when it came back, everything was orange for a considerable period of time, which obviously you can see his eyes is very severely kind of bloodshot and red still. So he has a scratched cornea, and it's not just let's put the goggles in to be really kind of ultra safe. Like they're there to protect him from something real, and it sounds like there was a reason why he came out at halftime in the last game, tried to shoot, and then ultimately very quickly gave up and didn't come back into the game. So for that to kind of turn around, for him to go and be playing with goggles, which is it's obviously great fun and really meme-worthy. It's not something that he's done before that I can remember, or certainly he hasn't done it as a Buck. So that's the kind of thing that often just throws guys completely off. They lose all sense of kind of particularly rebounding. It's interesting. Something like that, your peripheral vision, your ability to know where someone is, where you need to go and put a body. It can affect guys if they're shooting. You often see players who have to wear goggles, have to wear protective eyewear, ending up throwing them off after like a few shots. Bobby might never get rid of his at this rate. I mean, this was a really, really great performance. Interesting to see Bud go to jumbo front court. I'm in favor. That much is a given. But against this Bulls team in particular, I think it's going to be super tough. I don't think they have any answer, in part because of the rebounding, as you mentioned. And it gives Bobby so much freedom being out there with Giannis and Brook. And it works in a defensive way that it wouldn't work against all teams. I don't think this is something you can necessarily plan to be doing if you're without Khris going into a series against the Celtics or Nets. But against the Bulls, I think it opened up some things that really worked in the Bucks' favor and allowed them to just bludgeon the Bulls in this occasion.
Yeah. Certainly gave the Bucks an immediate scoring lift, hitting threes. So I think he was, 4 for 8 from 3 on the night. As you mentioned, the rebounding, just the overall dedication that the Bucks had from 1 through 5 of just clearing the boards every time, even if it was a long 3 and a long rebound or kind of like weird trajectories, like they were just on it. And Bobby helped collect that up. I mean, it helps when you have Brook and Giannis on the floor at the same time, so you kind of have like these, they're blocking it off in that sense. But like Bobby, among many, was kind of the epitome of just that second effort that the Bucks were largely lacking. That was heavily towards the Bulls side of the first 2 games, and Bobby helped set the tone that way. And I think to your point about, when someone suffers an eye injury and has to play with goggles or stuff like that, like Bobby Portis, we've long had the kind of long running discussion about like he's not naturally a center, but the Bucks play him because it's how their roster is and just kind of maximize their talent and spacing, everything like that. In this kind of like hybrid 3, 4, 5 or whatever, he was just kind of floating everywhere. And defensively, it worked out just because the Bucks were just putting the clamps on everybody. But it kind of helped Bobby in the sense that he's not really in the dangerous areas where he could further damage his eye. He's picking up those loose balls and getting those, long rebounds, as I mentioned, but like it was working out to a way where other people are doing the dirty work in terms of just like clearing out space for people to get those boards. Whereas Bobby's just kind of, the retriever, if you will. So from that standpoint, I just thought, it obviously worked to a T, the fact that it resulted in a 30-point victory. But I thought symbolically and, if we're getting into like the sentimentality of it all, I believe I said that word correctly.
Nailed it.
Brooke has mentioned multiple times of like Bobby being the Bucks' 6th starter. And we can get into semantics because you cannot have 6 starters, obviously. But like he has represented something greater, obviously, from last year and the playoff run and all that stuff. And the fact that he was willing to come back to Milwaukee and sacrifice for a personal gain when we know that he's had, all 8-digit offers on the table and stuff like that. And to essentially play out another prove it year or 1-2 year type of deal. I just thought like it was a thought that I put in the chat when it was, he was given the okay that he was going to play. And it was like, maybe they turned on him just because like we saw how game 2, we talked about it after game 2. It's like the emotional lift that the Bucks just didn't have that whole game, save for when it was like, okay, we got to turn it on now. We're down whatever, 15, 17 or whatever it was. Bobby threw out all that before he, it wasn't that long in that game, but he was doing everything he could. Even game 1, I mentioned with Rohan, like he didn't shoot the ball particularly well, but like defensively, he was, giving plenty of effort. He was coming on like help side situations and stuff like that. Like it was kind of playing like that PJ Tucker role, but like as Bobby and just kind of a little bit, I'm not saying he's this defensive ace that you have in your back pocket or anything like that, but like played in Bobby Portis's role of just doing a little bit of everything, just kind of, eschewing the concerns that you have with him on that side of the ball. Like, I just think it was the right move for them. And given just their play on the road, you don't know where you're the Bulls are obviously on this high of beating the Bucks and proving the doubters wrong that this series was not going to be a sweep. And, to their credit and to Bobby's credit, he played well. He tied Drew for the most shots on the game. Like there was just such a balance that the Bucks achieved tonight that really that was my biggest concern with losing Khris, that it wasn't a problem at all tonight. And Bobby kind of typified that, which was very, very positive to see.
Fun stat is that Bobby and Drew had as many rebounds between the two of them as Chicago's starting five, which I think kind of illustrates how badly. I mean, of course, Bobby's are a little inflated because Brooke and Giannis. I mean, Brooke gets 2 rebounds, the least among any Buck besides
Brooke and Giannis,
Javon Carter.
like combining for 9 boards, like is just so uncharacteristic. But it goes beyond Bobby, just the influence of having that kind of size out there, because you've got Drew with 6, you've got Grayson with 6, Pat with 4. So that's real evidence of just the Bulls could not get anything. The Bucks were just holding it down, and then it's just, okay, let's go and clean up, and everyone able to play their part in that. I think the one thing with Bobby and the defense in this series against this opponent, they just smothered the Bulls with size, and the Bulls don't have an answer for that. And I do think it's interesting, and I do think it could become a problem for the Bucks on the other end over the games ahead. Like, this was not the easiest game Giannis has had in terms of getting to the rim. He did a great job of saying, okay, I'm fine with that. I'm going to be a really active playmaker, and I'm going to be really decisive and try to make incisive passes. But on both ends of the floor, there were times where the paint was really crowded. For the Bulls, though, when they're attacking, there was nowhere for them to go for their mid-range shots. And that's why DeMar DeRozan is 4 of 9. Like, DeMar DeRozan, only after the game he had last time out, only attempting 9 field goals. That's just taking the heart and soul out of the Bulls by having that size there. And they're not a team that excels in going to the paint anyway. They're not a team that really looks to go and do that. But if you just cut that off entirely, because even when the game opens up, and I think their first 3 makes were all 3-pointers, and the Bucks are up like 21-9. It's like, if you're just never going to go inside, if you just can't do that, like that's certainly a place where the 3-point mat starts to work against you. So I will be interested to see as the series goes on how having those 3 guys out there works for the Bucks offensively, because I think this is the ideal scenario. Like, Giannis doesn't have to get to the rim. If you get a night where Grayson is really on and hitting shots, Bobby's on and really hitting shots, even Pat was better than he has been, still nowhere near his best. But if you get a night like we saw in game 2 where the role players are off, you're going to need Giannis to be able to get to the rim. That could cause some more problems with this lineup. But look, Bud has options. The Bucks have options. In that kind of scenario, you can quickly pivot to, okay, we're going to play one of Bobby or Brooke less, and it's going to be Grayson playing more, or Pat playing more, or Javon Carter, who had a really, really good game defensively tonight. You can go to those kind of options. But in terms of this as a starting look, I think the Bucks will stick with this until you ask them a question otherwise against the Bulls. And I don't know if the Bulls are actually capable of that. The only way Milwaukee might be forced out of this is if just having those 3 guys on the floor at the same time bogs down their offense at some point.
Yeah, and I think some of it's probably just going to be more adjusting, right? I mean, obviously you lose something on both ends when you bring in anyone coming off of the bench for Khris Middleton, but Bobby is one of the team's best 3-point shooters. I think it's just kind of getting used to him of playing with Giannis and with Brooke, which, has been talked about, I think, kind of half jokingly for a while, of like the Jumbo Bucks lineup. It's weird for them, I'm sure, to actually play sustained minutes like this. But, theoretically, you can still get a lot of spacing, man. I mean, Bobby Portis has been an absolute assassin. And thinking about it now as we talk about him, it's kind of funny that, the injury certainly played a role, but even today, even knowing that he was a full go before it was announced, I didn't really consider him for the starting spot. And it's mostly positionally. But, he's this season been the best out of all the options. He's had a really strong season. He's been the only one of those guys who started consistently. Grayson for a while when Khris was out, but Bobby certainly more. And I think it kind of makes sense. And it reminds me of Bud's quote after game 1, the infamous Giannis out for a little while. And he mentioned, and again, I don't think this is why he did it, but we like to see Bobby in some of those roles. I like getting a look at that. I just feel like I don't think it's set in stone yet. I think, we'll see what happens against every team. The Bulls are the Bulls. I think the Bucks are really curious to see how he holds up on both ends throughout a full playoff run against elite opponents in crunch time, in fourth quarters, against teams that are going small, against the team he wasn't able to play against. Well, they're probably going to lose, but against teams that dangerous offensively that he wasn't able to play against. I think the Bucks are very invested in this, and I think it's just interesting to me. It's very interesting to me. I feel like, is Bobby seen as kind of this swing piece where can we get 20% more out of him defensively? He's on Giannis's timeline. He's so dynamic offensively. What is there? I feel like obviously they want to win games and win a championship this year. That's, of course, the first priority for the Bucks. I think there is, though, a desire to see, what's the most we can get out of Bobby Portis on this team? And the return tonight was pretty damn good.
Also on that front, with decisions to make on Bobby, Brooke is playing well since coming back, so they're not in a spot where they're like, okay, Brooke is at this age and we need to move on, or that's a good idea for him to consider. So with that, if you're looking at, okay, well, we want to keep Bobby, and Bobby is going to have a longer time with the team. So what does that? You're going to have this period of overlap still, where it's like, how do we make all this work together? For tonight, there's probably also a very simple element of it too, which is, although Grayson went and scored 22 points, you're losing Khris. You're in a series that has been an offensive struggle and is low scoring so far. And the question that you're probably asking yourself if you're Bud is, we need 20 points. What's the best path we have to someone who can reliably give us 20 points in the starting lineup? And there's no debate about that. It's Bobby. Bobby is by far the most consistent volume scorer outside of kind of the non-big three. And that's maybe what it boiled down to in 2 games so far, and points weren't coming in bunches. So, yeah, Grayson could deliver it, and he actually did. And yeah, Pat maybe could get to 14 or whatever if he's playing a bit better. But Bobby is the guy where it's like, if you really need to fill what Khris was going to give you, you put him out there. And maybe they put him out there just saying, we know he'll score enough that the strain on the defense won't be so severe, only to find out actually, oh no, it worked really well defensively too. The Bulls just couldn't deal with the size. And that could be somewhat of a kind of a nice discovery rather than purely by design. But in seeing it in action, I don't know how the Bulls solve that right now.
I think to that point too, I know Jake Reitz talked about it when, the 20 minutes before the game started, we found out the news and stuff like that. Like, Rohan and I kind of touched on it after game 1. And so who are the Bulls shooting threats, from 3? It's Vooch when they got, the pick and pop and kind of, the Bucks are kind of trying to take away shots from LaVine or constrict airspace from LaVine and DeRozan. Kobe White, Alex Caruso. It's the kind of complementary guys that they have. You're gonna win. Whatever the case may be. If you see Patrick Williams or Alex Caruso, I know he's a good shooter, but when he has to shoot it from far range, it's not as successful as he is shooting from the corners. Those are wins in their
every shot he takes that DeMar doesn't is a win.
Yes, exactly. So to that point of if you're, it's easy to play this in retrospect, but if you're trying to not lose anything offensively, play within your system, which Bobby helps a ton, and just how efficient he is, he can go down low and all that stuff. And then defensively, it's Patrick Williams, they're going to keep starting him. Alex Caruso, yeah, he's their nominal point guard, but he's not really creating anything off the looks. If anything, it's just initiating for DeMar and Zach LaVine to kind of get things rolling. That's a lot of opportunity for Bobby to kind of not be tested defensively, and the Bucks to kind of muck things up as they did tonight, where everybody was just flying all over the court, even if it was switching everything, or if they're doing 1 through 4, or they're playing drop or anything like that. it just felt like the things that we wanted to see coming out of game 2, or even if as as much a despair as we were Wednesday night, we just wanted to see the Bucks kind of just imprint their will on the game, and we always know that will come defensively. And tonight was that to a T. It just felt like Drew was locked in from the moment he did his the Drew from he ripped the ball away from DeMar, and just like the help side activity was just on point to a degree. Like I don't like their last year's playoff run was like they locked in when their backs were against the wall, and obviously against guys like Kevin Durant, Trae Young, or bona fide all-stars, 30-point per game scorers. But like it just felt like the difference tonight for me was like everybody was doing, even Grayson Allen, like I'm sure we'll get to him shortly, but like he's fighting for rebounds and towering for these loose balls, or like at the height of like the rim itself. Like it was the collective effort of like just being locked into it to this degree of just what we have wanted to see for the start of the series, that was just so not only encouraging but just positive to see that they could do that for 3 quarters before Billy Donovan and Bud pulled the starters and key players. So that was, it just felt like putting Bobby in the starting lineup was kind of like the emotional lift that they needed, and then everything else just fell into place of playing not it was a perfect game, but it was damn close.
Not to go full Charles Barkley, we are going to start a dialogue. But do we think there is anything to, and I think this because I was thinking while watching the game, we've already mentioned Khris is not the most mobile player at this point. And we have discussed his season, particularly defensively, has not been as good as he has been in the past. It's been pretty bad at times. Bobby has his problems defensively. He has a multitude of problems defensively if you put him at the 5. In this kind of lineup construction, though, you get away with some of that. And what he brings that Khris doesn't is just good mobility and frantic energy, and just this ability to, I'm going to kind of do everything I can to close space, which he gets away with more when he's not the 5 and they're switching on to him and he finds himself on an island. It's an interesting thing just in seeing someone who is a little bit quicker in terms of how they can move about, brings more energy, certainly. I thought that was noteworthy. And to go back to an old staple of ours, Bobby out there, it's like, while it can be chaotic, while it's not necessarily always the crispest that you're going to see defensively, when he's at the 4 or the 3, as it was for times tonight, it's a great example of weaponizing your size, because you can just go out there and impose yourself on the opposing team. And I think it's interesting. It doesn't mean anything because we can't really do anything about it. In the bigger picture, Khris is a vital cog of this team. He's one of the 3 most important players on the Bucks. But it was a look at a quicker, more energetic player thrown into the mix that did yield some different defensive results and brought a kind of stifling defense that we haven't necessarily seen a whole lot of recently.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest questions when hopefully we get Khris back on the Bucks this playoffs is going to be, how is he moving, and what intent is there, and how much is he able to do? And obviously the injury is going to add even more question marks there. But, I think that was coming into the playoffs. I was relatively confident that when it really mattered, we'd see that shades of that old Khris of, came up as a 3-and-D guy, has not been that for years for good and bad reasons. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. But I think to carry on something you mentioned there, and we should probably get to someone besides Bobby soon, but he deserves it.
Luka.
He was awesome. Yeah. The idea, like you said, Bobby Portis is better as a 3 than a 5. Defensively, offensively, nothing matters. Giannis' team, it's very weird. But defensively, and again, do you want him guarding Jason Tatum? No, we saw that go badly.
Yeah.
But But generally, that the player types, what you're asked to do defensively, 3-4 is better for him than 5. Because 5 defensively, unless you're just switching everything, which is different, but drop or hedge or whatever, any of those things, I'd rather have him out there even against shiftier wings, not superstars when you can help it. But I think that is a better fit for what he can do because he can stay in front of guys. I mean, even when he got fried against Tatum, right? And he did get fried months ago now. Like, Tatum is like hitting step backs. It's not like totally losing Bobby or breaking his ankles.
Not blowing by him.
No, like Bobby is mobile. Like, he's shifty. He'll stay in front of guys. He's not an elite defender, but he's not awful. It's when in space, trying to be a big man, all that kind of stuff. So I think there's something real to that idea of, you know what? Here's what we're doing. Stay in front of your perimeter guy. Use those long arms. Use that size. Be disruptive. And we'll let Brook do Brook, and you guys don't worry about that. Like, I think that is a really unique and good way to approach using Bobby defensively. And again, it's one game. It's the Bulls. We'll see how they look in game 4, assuming they keep these starters. But I'm a big fan of, all right, Bobby, we tried the 5 thing. It's not really working, but clearly you're too good. We're going to play you. You have so much talent. Let's figure it out defensively for the games that do matter, and this is a good evidence point.
Well, if you're playing some kind of man defense, the smaller he plays, the more he's closed the space immediately to begin with. You're allowing him to stay tighter to those guys. Where, for example, if that's on DeRozan, he's there, and as you said, if he's there and he's in position, he can move his feet, he can use his size, and all of a sudden he's not easy to just kind of tear apart on defense.
Well,
the same matchup though, if that's coming off a switch, you're giving the smaller guy a chance to reset. Often you've got an ISO, and it's just natural in those kind of situations. Then the bigger defender is more wary. They go a little bit back on their heels. They're a little bit further back, and that's where the problems arise. So that is when he plays down a spot, he's closer to begin with. And if you give him that kind of proximity, one, it allows him to be more physical, but all of the areas that in space become liabilities, he actually can work them into some positives. Now, it's not like the solution here is ever to be like, oh, well, Bobby plays and Bobby is always a tree on defense. Like, as you mentioned, there are definitely plenty of guys who would just tear him apart in that regard. But there are a lot of guys that he'll hang with, and he'll find ways to just bother them much more so than if he's at the 5. And ultimately what it comes down to is, where is it going to do less damage to you having him out there defensively? And yeah, I think this is something that works, and we're saying some kind of, maybe this by necessity becomes an interesting piece of evidence that the Bucks have in their arsenal. Whether it works, like if you're seeing some Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown or Kevin Durant in the next round, that's a very different story, and they're different types of guys. But to your point earlier, Ty, I think Bobby has earned the benefit of the doubt, and the Bucks are just going to consistently dare teams to make him unplayable. And if they can, they'll say, fine, we've been here before, we know how to work with this. If they can't, you're going to keep playing him, though. So the onus is going to be on opposing teams, and Bobby is better, and the Bucks are better equipped to put him in spots that more suit his skills defensively.
Yeah, and to your point of like, if it is DeMar and stuff like that, like tonight showed that he's not just shooting over 2 arms; he's shooting over like 4 or 6. He's just being blanketed, and I believe he had 9 shots tonight. That's the fewest he's had all year. Like, wow. It was DeMar of the not infamous, but OG Bucks fans remember of Giannis's looking at the score sheet against the Raptors in 2017 and looking at DeMar only shooting like 8 shots or whatever, and him going kind of making this face.
Him and Khris looking at each other.
Yeah. It was that kind of like, it wasn't just the fact that DeMar, DeMar was just a non-factor. Whether it was seeing Drew or West just kind of tire him out and pick him up well beyond half court for large stretches of the game, but he's seen all these guys just come up to him. Brook was even playing way up higher, not in the paint and stuff like that. Like, they made a very concerted effort, and it's not a surprise. Obviously, after he drops how many points he did in game 2, 41 or something like that.
Yeah.
It was just life was tough for him, and the Bulls it was quickly apparent that unlike game 1 where the Bucks they still had a very loose way about him, obviously, as we saw in that game, especially as after the first quarter. The Bulls it was immediate, just oh, they don't have a counter. It's those Vooch pick and pops that were quickly kind of okay, let's get this going, and he's hitting shots, credit to him. But then it was just well, DeMar's not, the engine's gone. Zach LaVine is kind of this, I don't want to say periphery threat, but he's not a focal point in terms of how they're getting their offense going. And the Bucks just shut down the rim. They were bodies just not just loose balls, but Brook is blocking shots. It felt like they had 8 defenders out there, and I'm not saying that as officials thing or anything like that. It just felt like there were just so many guys just in every spot. And as I said before, it was just such a concerted effort of everybody 1 through 5 just playing lights out and not giving any just an inch of daylight to get shots up on the floor. That just it just quieted the Bulls to such a degree.
I love that the big Vooch adjustment was just saying, okay, Brooke, go close out on Vooch. And suddenly he's 3 for 9 from deep, and a factor, but it's clearly not enough of a factor, right? I mean, I think, and he's got to be shooting 10 of those and making 5 at least for it to really impact the game. If you're going to shoot 30, even 40% from 3, but you're only shooting 10 of them, it's 12 points. It's if there's nothing within the arc, that's not going to be enough. And I think that's the bet the Bucks are making, is we'll make it a little bit harder. Vooch is going to get some shots. He won't kill us, and he certainly didn't in this game. To illustrate the defense, the 3 quarters that the teams actually played, guys, Chicago scores 59 points, obviously averaging less than 20 a quarter, scored less than 20 in 2 of the 3 quarters. Nobody hits 20 points in this game for the Bulls. Nobody shoots 50% from the field or higher, except for Tristan Thompson, who shot twice, Derrick Jones Jr., who shot twice, and Tony Bradley, who was 5 for 5 in the last 6 minutes.
6 minutes? That's some Will Chamberlain-esque pace there.
The Tony Bradley per 36 truthers are eating good tonight. But so none of the rotation players who actually attempted shots found any success consistently. It's an absolute demolition. I think, yeah, we've talked about it. Drew and Wes, I don't think we need to go too deep. Neither had their greatest offensive game, but Drew was not a turnover machine, which I think is a big deal. And both guys,
I will say though, it may not have, the overall final box score may not have looked as positive as it looked like it earlier in the game, but he set it off right away.
Yeah, he did.
Defense, it was two-way performance of just he's ripping the ball away from DeRozan. It just was it's not just that, because that's obviously the glamorous plays, it's the action plays on defense that kind of get you off your feet and stuff like that. But he's just clamping down on DeRozan, making him uncomfortable with this,
putting him in jail.
Putting him in jail.
Hell prison. Shout out Laz, hell prison.
He just was. I mean, the fact that he can go Zach LaVine again, as I mentioned before, just a non-factor. He hit a couple shots. Credit to him.
Can we have a conversation with Zach LaVine?
He's coming back from the knee. I don't think he has it.
I think he's fake.
I think he's good. I don't think he has it right now.
But good to what level? I'm not saying he's. It's just he's not the level that the Bulls would like him to be. That lots of people have always talked him up to be. He is a third guy on a good-ish team. That's who he is.
He could be the third guy on a great team. He's very clearly the second guy on this team, and they were really good at one point. If the top
2 guys are good enough, he could, but it needs to be really good. He's not a player I've never felt like he had it, that he was ever as good as people made out to be. And every time I see him, it's I think there's always been something that comes from he has an ability, or certainly pre-injury maybe, and earlier in his career saw more of it, for the spectacular. And that gets you a lot of credit when you then start to do just some solid fundamental things well and show that you can score. But I think he's been drastically overrated. And in a playoff series, I think it's a problem, because when he becomes a key player for the Bulls or any team he may end up on in the future, like if an opposing defense zeroes in on him, I think he becomes really limited in a hurry. Now, of course, he's going to have like 50 points in game 4 because I said this, but I've never bought it, and I buy it less and less every time I see it. And I think in a playoff setting in particular, he's destined to find it really tough until maybe in his career he figures some stuff out, kind of like DeMar has. But I just like it. DeMar is kind of the only guy that strikes fear into me in terms of a star sense, because yeah, he can go and score 41 points, but we've also seen him now more often than that just kind of lay eggs. So for the Bulls, it's really, really tough.
One last note on DeMar, a big deal in Chicago. He attempts 5 free throws. The Bulls as a team attempt 10. That's one of those things where if that number is really low, it's going to be very hard for Chicago to win games. If the Bucks play solid they played great in this game.
That's the three bigs, though. Yeah. You'll keep it like that because they just don't want to go inside the arc at all.
Yeah,
like he's not even getting his mid-range looks and baiting the fouls on them.
Guys, though, it can be hard as a bigger guy to defend without giving up those whistles, even if you do play it relatively clean. Props to all three of those. Nobody on the Bucks had more than 3 fouls at the end of the game. Bobby 2, Giannis 3, Brook just 1 through their minutes tonight.
And DeMar was still baiting fouls because he had a couple on Giannis that were like one that was an off-ball charge.
It was a charge that got challenged and the Bucks lost, right?
Yes.
No, I don't even think that's the one. That was the later call.
Oh.
I don't think that was the offensive foul that was called. I think that was a defensive one. But 3 times Giannis was caught up in fouls that were questionable calls, all involving DeMar. Twice offensive fouls. But he could still do that. But if he's not getting to his spots where he needs to get to dangle his legs and to get the kind of fouls that he would usually get the benefit of the doubt on, particularly at home, yeah, big trouble.
Fresh quote from Eric Name, further cementing what we said about Bobby. Must have asked him about it. Quote, "I couldn't see it all," is what he said about and he still tries to go back in the game. Pro athletes are a different breed. If my eye bled, I would be home. I wouldn't watch the rest of the game from the bench, from the locker room. I would get an Uber. I would cry a lot. His eye bled. Shout out to Bobby Portis.
As I tweeted out, the thing is, his vision's a little blurry. All he sees is Bulls jerseys. Nikola Vucevic becomes Nikola Mirotic in that scenario. That's what happens. and Bobby brought his A game. That's all it takes.
He did. There's another. We haven't talked about the Bucks leading scorer. We keep saying we're going to talk about him. We haven't. Jordan, what was your thought on Grayson Allen? We talked about it last pod. The pressure going into Chicago. All he does is outscore everybody in the game, have an incredible offensive night, and really provide that punch we said the Bucks would need with Khris out. We didn't anticipate this coming from the bench, but maybe it's even more helpful to have a bench player who's capable of 20-point outings.
And to throw it to you, Jordan, to add into that for your answer, do we think this was a factor in Bobby starting? Like, will Bud have considered a lot of what we talked about, which is this is a tough spot for Grace and how do we make it easier for him? I don't know. Did it play in? There's lots of other factors, but I'll leave that there for you too, Jordan.
I think that is something to consider. I mean, we talked about after game 2 of like, we saw Grayson step up in a similar spot when the Bucks were without Giannis, Drew, Khris at early points of the season. Obviously, the Caruso incident earlier in the year kind of dethrow them to the Wolves kind of thing like that, and you're playing in hostile territory. All those factors, like, it made for an interesting like dilemma. And obviously, we didn't really talk about Bobby just because we didn't know his availability. The fact that he's literally saying I could not see the other night, like, and it's Friday night, it's not even 48 hours later. Like, it was a very similar way of like how it could be. But I he was lights out, hit his first 3 threes, outscored the Bucks bench scoring in the first quarter from game 2. Like, he was dialed in from the moment. The fact that he's aggressive in terms of not just looking for a shot from 3, but like driving to the hoop. Even when I know he had some kind of, errant layups and stuff like that, but like the overall mentality that we, it's different when we're talking about Khris and Jrue, kind of like more so Khris in the first, game and 3/4 of game 2, like when he's not looking for a shot, when he's kind of shying away from that. Like, we don't expect that from, one of your 3 best players or your top 3, big 3, whatever the case may be. With role players, it's a different kind of ball game. It's, especially a young guy like him who, it's, as I talked about last time, this is his first rodeo in terms of like playing in the playoffs, not like being the underdog and kind of like happy to be here with, as he was with the Grizzlies last year, getting out of the play-in tournament. Like, Bucks are, even with the setback with Khris, they're looking to defend their title. And games 1 and 2 were what they were. It wasn't flashy performances by him by any means, but he turned it on when the Bucks go down, or the series is tied and the series switches over to Chicago. And I it's hard not to be impressed by Grayson and delivering one of his best performances of the season, if not his best performance considering the circumstances. But I just thought his overall mentality, it went beyond just scoring and shooting the ball. It was, hunting down those rebounds and everything like that. Like, he just played with a purpose that was not there in games 1 and maybe a little bit in game 2, or vice versa, whatever the case would be. But I just thought, home run performance. I wouldn't compare it to like the Bryn Forbes game 2 against the Heat kind of game, even though he was, lights out from shooting. I thought he delivered in bigger ways than Bryn Forbes delivered elsewhere in that game, obviously. But it's
also a chance that this might happen again in this case, where there wasn't really in that case.
Yeah, it didn't feel like this kind of fluke, like, you got away with a game 1 that it didn't look like you should have won or anything like that. Like, the Bucks played lights out, and Grayson Allen, was a big part of that. He was a leading part of that, even though he was a lead scorer. But it just came so naturally to him in ways that we haven't seen for him in a few months, honestly.
To follow up on your bench scoring stat that he matched their total in the last game in the first few minutes or first quarter, all Bucks bench players, games 1 and 2 combined, scored 24 points. Grayson had 22 tonight. He's 1 basket away from totaling their entire bench production in the Milwaukee first pair of games. So clearly that's a big difference right there. And Pat had a much better game too. I think Pat outscored the Bucks bench from game 2. They only had 8 points. So does he have to have 22 on insane 3-point shooting every night? No, but finding shots, being aggressive, taking it to the rim when there is a hard closeout, just, these things where what I wouldn't do to see, or what I would do to see this Grayson somehow, when everyone is healthy, I think the Bucks would score 130 like regularly. I guess they did do that somewhat often in the regular season, but they just have so much firepower. I think that is long-term, Grayson under contract, a lot of other guys under contract. That's going to be the big sticking point, right? Is how can we get this kind of Grayson more often? And maybe being that super sixth man will help with that. But certainly I think for the short term, these games without Khris, the rest of the Bulls series, again, doesn't always have to be this level of scoring, but I want to see this intent from Grayson out. Go find shots. Go put the ball in the hoop, because there's a big offensive spark plug missing from the lineup, and anything he can do is going to be helpful. And clearly in this game, it's exactly what we talked about, wanting and needing to see from him.
I'm not usually someone who put a lot of stock in the tournament in college basketball, but particularly given the context of Grayson coming into United Center and the whole atmosphere and him being public enemy number 1, it's like, yeah, I've done it like 20 times before. He won a national championship with that being the vibe every time he took to the floor. Like, he is used to that. This is different. It's a different level of competition, so there's always going to be concerns with that. But what he showed tonight is, like, he came out ready to compete and he came out aggressive, and the shots go down and all of a sudden the game takes off. But that's kind of the most important thing, is he didn't shirk from the challenge, from the atmosphere at all. The concerns we did have, the concerns the Bucks may have had, that was all really answered. Now, I was glad to see Bud still protected him, because when he pulled guys, Grayson was a bench guy. Grayson could have stayed in for a few more minutes. That would have been a really bad idea, because it is, if you give the Bulls a chance in this series, it is going to happen. Someone will try to take his head off. And the Bucks really can't afford that now more than ever. So I was glad that as soon as that happened, the Pat stayed out there. Bud's instinct is probably to protect his guy, Pat, but not in this situation. Pat might have to play some garbage time minutes if there are more games to go like this, because you've just got to, the second the game is over and the Bulls aren't going to be playing to win anymore, Grayson Allen has got to be out of the game. But in terms of what he brought, like, perfect. The energy is perfect. The attitude, the way he applied himself, it's exactly what you want. And then we know he can score. As you said, Ty, yeah, with Grayson firing, everyone healthy, this is a 130 points per game sort of team. The issue in the regular season was when that would happen, they'd often give up 130 points as well. Yeah. So it's finding the balance. So this is an instance where you managed to get that. If you can find ways where that continues, that keeps going, well, good luck. Like, that's the thing. When they acquired him, we talked about the differences from what they had last season, from the differences in what they'd, whether it's PJ or even the idea of what Dante could have been. Just a completely different player, much more skilled, a much better shooter and scorer. And on a night like tonight, that mattered quite a lot.
Probably took less shots than Dante would have taken in this game if he was in the same role, while being a much better scorer and shooter. Grayson took 12. I think we would have seen maybe a 20-piece here from Dante DiVincenzo. I think Grayson, too, kind of on that Bobby level of, like, is he a great defender? No. Is he going to fight? Is he going to make some splash plays? Is he going to try whatever he can do? Yes. And, 2 stocks, no turnovers in this game is, again, a guy who's not going to hold up against the star players of the league, but athletic, bigger guy, fights for rebounds, goes for the ball. I feel like really,
that was a big time block too. That wasn't just like, that was a Showtime again, where it's like, yeah, I really want to get under the skin of every person in this building, even more than I already am.
Yeah. Well, I think the blocks, he clearly has that burst, but he is really good at poking the ball out of a mess of players. And I've seen it more and more as the season's gone on. Like, if he's one defender away or he's in the paint guarding someone and someone's dribbling in, he's really good at knocking that ball out. And those are high-level transition opportunities because the offense still moving one way, the ball, and like Giannis especially, but any Bucks really, you get Giannis running, anyone else with the ball, those are great looks for Milwaukee. And just one steal in this game. But I just think, and I've talked about this before on the pod, but you can make up for not being great every single possession on ball if every few possessions you can create something like that, because those are such valuable opportunities, and it makes up for, oh, yeah, he got beat on a drive by Zach LaVine. It happens. It happens to a lot of players. So I just think, yeah, just a really strong all-around game for Grayson.
Yeah.
Are we gonna talk about the star of the show at some point?
Yeah. Let's do the.
Anything to say, Ty?
I'm not eating crow yet. I was happy though.
That's not how it doesn't get to work like that.
It's going to. Luka Vildoza checks in for the last 8 minutes. Some incredible passes. I will give it. And he does hit a 3. His first 2, not great, but he does hit a 3. But really, really impressive passes. A nice steal in transition.
I'm not even joking. It's saying, like, maybe 3 of the top 10 Bucks passes of the season.
I don't know about top 10, but they were 3 of the best I've seen.
Oh, come on. They were. I haven't seen a Bucks player who could throw those kind of passes. Come on, Jordan. Who are you going to say?
Giannis
has some awesome passes. Khris has some great passes too.
Giannis passed great, but the levels of disguise on some of the passes, that stuff matters. Like, it looks perfect in a blowout, sure, but it will be a thing if they keep him around and we get to see, does he become someone who even is around the fringes of the rotation next year? Like, if you got a guy who can do that kind of thing in real games, that opens your offense up so much. Like that, it looks like just kind of showy, flashy stuff that doesn't necessarily have a place in the flow of regular offense, but it does, because it's very difficult to defend if you've no idea what the guy with the ball is going to do. And he is exactly that kind of player. My only point on it was you were dismissing him out of hand, Ty, because he hadn't been an NBA player. But this is not. I was higher on Elijah Bryant than a lot of people. I think Elijah Bryant could play, but this is not Elijah Bryant. Like, this is an Olympian. This is the Argentinian national starting point guard. Like, he's a real player with real skill that I don't think it's a case of, oh, he's not good enough to be in the NBA, that he hasn't been there till now. And there's a real chance he could stick and he could be useful for the Bucks. We have a lot more to see on that. And realistically, we're not going to see it in the playoffs. Although, if they keep blowing the Bulls out like this for the remainder, and he gets to come into games and do this, who knows what happens at some point. But just immensely fun. Like, I'm not going to pretend I look forward to garbage time with this Bucks team. Rohan isn't here, I could say it. Thanasis is not always the most fun. He has very fun.
He's fun with Luka.
Yeah.
He was fun with Luka. That's like a perfect partner for him, which as lots of people noted. If Luka can do that when Giannis is out there, that's maybe the most watched thing of the entire NBA. But Thanasis, we all know how that experience can go. There'll be some fun dotted in, and there could also be some pretty ugly basketball. And with some of the other guys out there too, it's not necessarily my idea of fun, this Bucks team in garbage time. But Luka brought something different, and he brought everyone else. He brought Thanasis up with him. Didn't exactly bring Jordan Nwora up with him. Jordan Nwora did not shoot well, leave a good impression.
I think we can cross out the Jordan Nwora as a fill-in rotational piece idea.
Is Luka ahead of him in your own personal rotation now?
No, we're not there yet.
Ah, come on.
Jordan? No shot there's an answer here.
He's probably not going to, just because position.
No, I'm not asking as a serious. Of course not going to happen. He's not with the team long enough to play in the playoffs. Don't make those eyes after giving that answer.
Those logistics are gone.
But just personally, in terms of what you're wanting to see or what's even interesting, I'm at a point where it's like, I think Jordan Nwora can play. I think Jordan Nwora can score. We've seen it. We know it. And my line for a long time is, he could be a really good scorer on a not very good team. You know, that's like, he could have a long NBA career where people are like, oh, he's a solid scorer, not a star level scorer, but he's a solid, I don't know, a comp isn't coming to mind for me right now. Like a Nick Young type, a little bit better than that in terms of discipline, although remains to be seen. You know, those guys can have long careers. You can make a career, you can make a name for yourself.
Bees.
I don't know if I push it that far now. Bees is
He's Carmelo on the left side of the floor. No, I know what you mean, but to your point of, like, we've gotten used to garbage time with the Bucks over the Bud era for a long time, especially the first 2 years. I mean, they were steamrolling teams for a long time. A lot of it was coming out of the Central Division, which you're playing four times a year. The difference when, again, we're talking about this for 8 minutes of garbage time compared to however many minutes they've accumulated over the last 4 years. They just haven't had a true point guard.
Yeah.
Direct that. And it's
loads of guys just getting shots up, and they're not good enough at shooting to be in the rotation in the first place.
Yeah, and it's the system shots rather than this guy that, you know, he has great size and he clearly knows how to dribble basketball and play make and a very, you know, if it's not NBA level, it's damn near close to that. He hasn't established himself at the NBA level, but hopefully he does for him, you know, his sake. But, like, that's what's missing with, like, it's always been kind of the same. You'll see a Thanasis slam, or you'll see Jordan Nwora do a step back three or stuff like that. Like, or Robin Lopez way back in the day of like doing his little hook shot and stuff like that. Yeah, but it's they haven't had a kind of floor general or just kind of an organizer with point guard capabilities, and that's what made it a little fun tonight. I'm not saying we're going to see that maybe for much of the series or even
would you like more fun though?
I would like more fun. I would like.
Are you in favor of fun personally, Jordan? So
I'm in favor of fun. You want garbage time to kind of be like, it is nice to have it in the bag, but you also want garbage time to equal like how the game was for 38 minutes, the first 38 minutes.
Yeah, you want some. My reaction when it goes to it and the players are pulled at that point, it's like I was 2 screening for the night the Brewers were on 2, and that was right at the moment the Brewers game was finishing, and I was just like, I wish the Brewers game went for another 9 minutes here, because I think this isn't going to be fun. And then Luka makes it something, and it's like literally you're like, okay, I need to really lock myself in. In some ways, it was the most interesting part of the game. Yeah. But yeah, it's a very different type of player, and it's not something we spend too much time talking about now, or likely in the games ahead. But with everything going on with George Hill, like what the Bucks do with George Hill this summer, what George Hill himself, like with his health and decisions that may need to be made there, I don't know if he's back next year, one way or another. I don't know if George Hill is going to be a Buck next year. And the Bucks more than ever are going to be operating in a really tough spot, because even if that is the case, their priorities are likely going to veer towards one of, if not both of, Pat and Bobby. And then what does that leave you? And if the answer is, well, you've got Javon Carter and you've got Luka Vildoza, the Bucks have been in worse spots than that, certainly for a regular season, because there you could have one guy who you can trust to actually run the offense and charge the offense, and one guy who you can trust to lock in and be your defensive first point guard. Like, that doesn't sound terrible to me. So if that's the spot they're in, maybe that's also part why they took this flyer. Because even after he signed is right around the time then that George started to reveal obviously what was going on. That was something they would have known internally, and they're like, we've got a roster spot, maybe they like a point guard, let's go get him. I think that's kind of an interesting element to it too. I don't expect Luka to be anything other than having to fight for a spot come training camp, but that guy is going to tear it up in preseason. If he's fighting for a spot coming into next season, he's getting that spot.
I think I just wish we had seen him more before, but like I want to see him in a real run, both ends. I think the passing is clearly there, the handle. I'd like to see him take to the basket and how that looks. I think it was just all jumpers, but it was certainly a good first impression. Last garbage time note, sadly kind of similar to the Warren note, Serge, man. He tried to dribble to bring the ball up the court, and it just looked like he handed it to a Bulls player. I don't really understand how it happened. It's bad. It's really bad. And
I wouldn't have recommended 2012 Serge if I could do that.
Yeah, it was ambitious for sure, but it was just dribbling. He wasn't like pressured. It just didn't go well. But putting up shots defensively.
At his age and his point in his career, the Bucks aren't doing him favors if they wanted to get the best out of him by not playing him at all and then throwing him in too. Like, and that's at the place where you're like, he can't hold a spot in the rotation, so you're not getting him reps. He's not in any rhythm. It's tough to then turn to him and expect much of anything positive. And I think that was very evident tonight. He looked like a guy who's just not playing at all, and is at a stage in his career where that can't be.
It's not like. I mean, I'm not suggesting he do this because this is his life and or anything like that. But like, it doesn't feel like Marvin Williams where he's like, "Yeah, I'm done. I'm retired." It's like it looked like you were still capable. Like, I mean, even with playing in the wreckage of the bubble. And
Marvin was a wild man. That was it was jarring at the time.
It was, but like it felt like, I mean, if you wanted to, if he had the mentality of wanting to play another year or play for a championship contender,
he looked good.
Yeah, he looked good. Like considering where he was, but like Serge is not that.
No,
It's not that at all.
no.
Which is unfortunate because he has been a reliable NBA player for up until he signed with the Clippers. Unfortunately, it just it gives out, and
Yeah.
it's hard to reclaim, especially when you're trying to get back from injury, and then it's like, okay, I'm back from injury. Then how do I play at an adequate level? And it's it's lucky that the Bucks have had Brook come back and go as well as we could possibly hope. Even tonight, I know it was a quiet night, but he was blocking shots, doing his little Brook shots in the paint and stuff like that, and all that stuff. But like, they haven't had to lean on Serge Ibaka, and it's turned out that's for the best.
It's also good that Horst got those picks in the deal as well. So that's what that deal will ultimately be remembered as.
I still think we probably see him a bit more if the Bucks can get through this series, another series, and then run into Philly. But I don't think next round. I would expect more minutes allocation like this against Boston or against Brooklyn.
I've been a very much a pro Philly kind of person. With the news today, though,
yeah, it's going to be tough.
We'll see how they go, and if
the injuries
how it would be at that point too. They sure are. Yeah,
Lowry now leaves the game with a hamstring. He's going to try and play Game 4, but the Hawks steal one in Atlanta. But yeah, it's.
Can we do one quick shout out to one of their Bucks players?
No. Yeah, of course we can.
I
talk Luka again. Is that it?
No. I was impressed by Javon Carter. He did not.
Yeah, he was great.
He did not attempt a single shot tonight.
Classic Javon Carter.
And it did not matter. I thought
plus 19.
Yeah, plus 18 and 17
with 0 shots.
That's not an easy thing to do. I just thought like whatever kind of the residual of like, okay, you have Drew, you have the starting five locked in. How do you maintain that defensive energy and intensity when you're going to your bench, when Drew's not on the floor, or Wes is not on the floor, whatever the case would be? And Javon brought that. Like, he was playing like a bulldog, as he's often talked about and stuff like that. Like, I just thought that was exactly, it was not, obviously we talked about like the starting lineup and stuff like that, but like he was also like part of the team wide of just like, we're not giving them anything. And if he doesn't attempt a single shot or whatever he wants to do in future games, like if he's played to that level of like really in their face and picking people up, off of inbounds passes and stuff like that, like the Bucks will live with that. And it's a different flavor than what we're used to last year this time around, like with the playoffs and stuff like that. But like even without PJ being there, like it's nights like tonight where you just can kind of see like, oh yeah, this team is just so. It's just like I obviously cannot describe it as
there's a hunger though, right? Because even Grayson brought that with his competitiveness. Like, and that was something I know we talked a lot about when PJ came in, that the team needed an edge. It needed someone who was going to drive and set standards. And they don't have that in that way this year, but they're finding it in a slightly different way. Like, to me, what Javon looked like tonight is he looked like a guy fighting for his job, a guy trying to ensure he has a spot in the league next year, which is what he is.
Yep. And
it's how he should be playing, how you'd kind of expect him to play, but that is not a given, and it's not normally what happens with guys in that situation, particularly if they're put into like this kind of high leverage situation where the stakes could not be much greater. You're on the champs, it's 1-1, and you've just lost one of your best players. Like, you don't want to fall behind there. It all of a sudden can become very embarrassing very quickly. And just not daunted. He's there to do what he does to prove that has value to the Bucks, that has value to any other team, whatever it may be. Job done. Like, I don't think Javon Carter is going to have a problem finding a team to take him next year, and I don't think he'll have a problem if he wants to stay with the Bucks, finding the Bucks to be open to that too. It's whether another team actually sees something where they're like, hey, we'll offer you a little bit more money or more years, whatever it might be. And good for him, and keep that energy going and see where that takes him. But it's like, it's what you expect from someone in that situation because it's what they need to deliver. But it just doesn't it's impressive for actually coming through with that, because most players who are on that kind of on the bubble as such, that's part of why, because they can't go and deliver that. Javon Carter is proving he is a legit NBA player and an NBA rotation player and a rotation player on a top tier playoff team on a contender. That's so impressive.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. He played 22 total playoff minutes in his career before this season. So it's a guy who's really never had a role like this. I think he played 17 tonight, so nearly matched his Phoenix playoff minutes right there. And I don't think he's fazed by anything. I don't think it matters to him at all. Doesn't play for a while, comes back in. It's the exact same energy. It's Bobby Portis-esque of like, oh, cool. All right, I get team, totally whatever you guys ask. If I don't play this game, I don't play this game. I'll come out the next game and do the same stuff. And I think there's a ton of value in a league that has so many dynamic guards and perimeter players of being able to say you're getting Drew in all the starters minutes. Oh, you play pass when Drew switches out and try and dodge that. Here's Javon Carter for 8 minutes. Like, have fun. Like, there's no let up. You're getting picked up from even earlier up the court. It's just a nightmare to play against the Bucks. And Drew, West, Giannis, Javon Carter, Brook Lopez behind them. Like, there's so much defensive, like, skill, but also, like, playmaking. Like, any mistake, and they're just all over you.
It's even, there was a sequence in game 2, which I'm sure you'll both remember, because just visually it was hilariously funny, where he was on DeMar DeRozan and he got really low, and he's not the tallest guy to begin with. DeMar is 6'6", probably like a 6'9" wingspan. He was like down at DeMar's hip, and the shot is there for DeMar, but DeMar is just kind of baffled and he's puzzled. He's looking, he's like, this guy is right up in my grill, except like he's down by my hip. But the intensity of it, like, there is something really weird, unique about him as a player that is going to throw guys off too, because you don't see it very often, and you could just assume, oh, well, he's super small, so I'll just be able to do what I want. It does not work like that, because he's smart enough, because he's competitive enough.
Physical. It's the same idea of PJ getting into KD, right? Like, KD could always shoot over PJ, but it's not easy. There's a mental thing of closing out and just being in someone's space.
It's messing with like shot prep. It's that kind of stuff that, like, we look at the result, or, you know, how close the defender is. Like, I know that was a big thing that Bulls fans were picking up on after game 2, and rightly so. DeMar DeRozan was scoring like at will when Giannis was, you know, closing down on him or covering him completely. But there is, you know, that subtle, the sweet science, as those boxing enthusiasts from 1940 would talk about. Like,
of course. We're all familiar with those guys.
Yes, Rocky Marciano. But no, like that kind of thing of like getting low and just kind of like that was a big thing with like Kristaps for a long time, where he's this towering guy, but he can't shoot over 6'4" people.
It was the Wes Matthews signature. There's the most amazing West defensive footage out there is Kristaps trying to post him up and just failing abysmally over and over. Every time the teams play, they'd just be like, oh, Porzingis 7'2", he's yours, Wes. And Wes would be like, cool. And he just couldn't do anything.
I just love having 3 guys like that, because it's just like such a, like, imagine being an offensive player, you hunt for the switch, you fight, you finally get it, and you go from Drew to Wes or to Javon or Giannis or whoever. It's like, oh, we accomplished nothing. It took half the shot clock. I still don't want to play against this guy.
Also, to include, I mean, defensively, he was great. 4 assists, 0 turnovers. Like, I'm not saying I agree with Adam. Like, he's not a lead ball handler in that kind of traditional point guard kind of way, but a lot of those were like extra passes or driving and kick and getting the Bulls defense to move around and stuff like that. Like, the little stuff that, you know, it's the bare necessity when it comes to like NBA offenses now, but it helps when he can just deliver a very precise pass to an open shooter and they knock it down. Like, it's very it's not complicated. It's very simplistic, but like, he can do that very well and has done that very well with the Bucks. And it helped when they had a big turnover problem through games 1 and 2.
Also, it's the willingness to make the simple pass. So the ball comes to him, his first instinct isn't, oh, am I going to take this shot? Yeah. Like, he is selfless and he has a sense of his limitations. So he's he's probably thinking pass first. And that's actually really helpful when you're where the Bucks were in game 2, which is the ball was not moving. They had a serious problem with stagnant offense, which is something that has plagued them over and over again. And the Bucks are a team that if you can get the ball moving, they're basically impossible to stop because it means you're going to get it to multitude of very, very good catch and shoot guys. Giannis is likely to get the ball with a head of steam. Like you can get it to him in motion. He's going to get better looks. So just being willing to make the simple passes is a big deal for this team. He can leave the flashy stuff to Luka. Luka can, in his minutes, his 25 minutes he'll be playing game 4, he can just kind of cut the defense apart and Javon can make the extra passes and everything will be fine.
The only players still on the roster who make the Bucks better via offensive rating are made in the regular season. Then Javon Carter, Drew Holiday, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Khris Middleton, Boogie, and Javon Delorier. But then there's Javon. What did I miscount?
No. I added Javon to the big
yeah. Shout out to Javon. His 3 minutes, 171 offensive rating. But no, I think the way to put it, it's like the handle is good. It is a good handle. It's not crazy. He doesn't have like the, like LeBron or Jokic kind of vision of like, oh, he's diming it between two guys or he's not looking. But his decision making is just like super high level. It's just like, oh, that's the right move. I will do that. And I think what he's done it less in the playoffs, but some of those regular season games, like even that extended to shot making, like he would take some nice off the dribble shots just because no one's open. I do have space. They're not respecting my jumper. I'll pull up from right here. So yeah, interesting. I really hope they can keep him around. Obviously, been a fan, but I think he fits well. Honestly, I think the comp that I've been mulling over, I think he's what I wanted Delly to be when they signed Delly. Like he's not really a point guard, but he's an apex superstar point guard. Like the whole thing was Delly can play off of Giannis like he played off of LeBron. That's what they need. They don't need that lead ball handler. It turns out they totally did, and thankfully they have Drew now. But it's that kind of idea of like he doesn't initiate a lot, but a little bit here and there. But it's like he'll make the right decision. He'll take the right shot off of Giannis and Drew and Khris and everyone else. And I think
it's the right role too, because that was the thing. Yes. Delly had the right role in Cleveland. He came to the Bucks. The Bucks needed to be a starter. That's a completely different thing. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
So that's Javon can play the Delly in Cleveland role, which works.
It also helps when you have a guy like Drew where Delly gets replaced by Brogdon, and Brogdon's the better player, but it wasn't like they were trying to play, Brogdon and Delly together around. You know what I mean? Like it was very. I mean, we can second guess Jason Kidd decisions from 5-6 years ago.
I hear he's a great coach now. He's changed. I saw something today.
Can't even do it. I can't unpack that.
I'm just gonna wait a little bit longer. That's all I'm gonna say. People were
was good for Kidd in Milwaukee too.
It was, and also in spite of what our eyes,
the carcass of a team right now.
In spite of what our eyes were showing us, and what his bout was in fact saying often in press conferences. It wasn't unusual for big moments to come, national media to drop in, and you'd get an article about Jason Kidd, the genius head coach, and all the things he's doing. So I think there may still be elements of that. We'll reserve judgment. Good for him. Good for him. Bucks got a championship, right?
It's true. Our short pod.
He only took years off my life, but good for him.
Our short pod is at 80 minutes. We're talking about Jason Kidd. Is there anything else from Game 3 or looking ahead to Game 4? Actually, I do want to do one more thing. Bucks in 5? That's where I'm at.
I think there's one more gets dropped. It could be the next one with the noon start.
Yeah.
I think at some point this is going to be a problem for the offense where the role players don't hit shots. And then it's going to be, okay, can Giannis work with Bobby out there and Brook out there? And if that's not the case, if you got to sacrifice one of them and your role players aren't hitting shots, you're putting yourself into a really tough position where Giannis needs to go and get 40 plus anyway. Now, the Bulls just may struggle to score that. You'll find ways to get through those games, but I do think there's a possibility that there's a game like that still to come. I will say one thing. I will say, I was down bad with the Middleton injury, and I thought, there's a chance that this could be over. I was even before. I never even came round until the game happened today, and it wasn't even that doubting Giannis. I was just giving the Bulls credit they don't deserve. Like this is still the Bulls who just cannot beat good teams, and spent the whole season showing that they cannot do that. They're not going to do it 4 times here, Khris Middleton or no Khris Middleton.
Yeah.
So the Bucks are winning this series really regardless of what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to your point of whether it's role players hitting the shots that they weren't in games 1 and 2, like, are we really just talking about Grayson in that sense? Well, it wasn't like Pat was...
Pat was better than he has been, which is not Pat ideal.
Was better. But, like, I mean, Bobby saw out game 3 where he didn't see out game 2. Literally. He could not see.
Pat and Grayson tonight is 33 points. Like, those two combining for that, you could get a night where they combine for 6 points.
But we already got that is then are we going to get another one?
Yeah, I think we could.
I think it'll be more in the middle.
It's definitely possible.
I mean, we didn't go too crazy in depth in Drew outside of like a few minutes, but like if you look at the final box score, like it wasn't like you could look at his game 2 performance or box score and look at game 3 performance and be like, what was the big difference? Well, I was like, buddy, it was a big difference. Yeah. Just let me tell you, buddy, kind of thing. But like, that's where I'm like, we're not going to see DeMar DeRozan attempt the fewest shots that he had all season again.
You sound like DeMar after game 1 now.
True.
And he nearly matched it tonight. Like, I mean, it was more efficient, but no.
He's getting to know her. He's told her he likes her, and now he's ready to progress.
He's ready for that first kiss.
It's not even his best quote from the series. The jail one is way better.
Yeah. I just think this Bucks defense, that was largely the problem, again, in part because DeMar went off in game 2. If they played like they did in games 1 and 3, like, they can win 80 to 60, and it'll be like,
yeah, okay, I think it's filleted. I mean, you were saying it earlier, Adam. Like, you don't see the Bulls counter to this, and I just think the Bucks, for all their early in a series warts, they've shown a lot last postseason. When they get a team figured out, like they kind of just put them in a sleeper hole, and that's that. Mm-hmm. And I just think we're at that point. I mean, if you can beat Phoenix 4 straight, albeit with a healthy Khris Middleton, I just think once again, would it be great if the Bucks could come in with some of these adjustments in place and not do this early? Yes, it would be. But this has been their recipe, and I think we're in for another one of these series.
Yeah, well, that's to be clear on that. I do not think the Bulls are going to find an answer. Like the Bulls counter will be that the Bucks counter themselves, and the Bucks are more than capable of doing that.
That's fair. We've certainly seen it.
And the one thing though that hasn't happened is we haven't seen Giannis just completely dominate a game in this series yet. I mean, his first 2 games, his numbers are good, but we haven't had a game where it's like just literally what we see 3 times a week at minimum in the regular season. That's going to happen.
Team high plus 36 in this game, despite the only 18 points for Giannis.
Great decisions, great decisions, not forcing anything and trusting his teammates and his teammates paying it off. And maybe in a somewhat symbolic way, trusting his teammates too, as in Khris is down, but we can still do this. We've still got enough. It's an interesting approach to taking this game, and it paid off. And I think as a group in the locker room, where if we felt down, I'm sure they felt down after the loss, and with Khris getting hurt and with Bobby, I guessed it. Like in the locker room at the time, you're like, yeah, I can't see. This is a big, big turnaround from that, and they'll feel very confident themselves. They could win in 5. I just think there is definitely potential for the Bucks to do everything they can to give the Bulls a chance in one of these, that it's a close game where they could drop it.
That's fair.
A noon start on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Quick after a dominating game. Like, there will be shaky moments no matter what.
We'll see. I don't know. I think
Ty is right. Ty is right. They don't let up.
Yeah.
Like, that is when they get to this spot. Their thing was last year, they put themselves in trouble, and then they figure it out. And they'll just like, oh, we'll win 4 in a row now.
It's
That's
literally
fine.
Rocky. Like, the jaw is just too strong. You tire yourself out punching the Bucks in the face, and they just go, all right, now what? And then it's over.
They're like one of the good Devin Williams games.
Oh, yeah, well,
where the bases get loaded, and then he wakes up, and he's like, oh, I'm just going to get 3 quick outs. Jordan, but they could still have one of the bad Devin Williams games, too.
On the pod, on Cruising for a Bruising, Jordan, I heard mention of Francisco Rodriguez. There's a player worth diving into sometime, Adam. He most famous with the Mets.
Goggles,
Mets.
Also Goggles, too.
Goggles player. What they call him, like...
A-Rod.
No, that, but he had like 25 minutes of... He said he led the NL in saves one year, but it was all that same, like, load the bases. Like, if he's up 3, give up 2 runs and then do it. Like, it's a lot to watch, but fun delivery.
I think Ty wants on Cruising for a Bruising.
I gotta watch some games.
Gotta watch the games. You need to get into the season, Ty.
I know. Well, stuff going on.
Tell me about
it. All right. So, good pod. We're more optimistic. It was a great game. I do have a review from the Eurostep Discord entry, Eurostep Podcast Network Discord entry form, which is available in our Twitter bios. I think all of ours, at least mine, and the Eurostep Podcast, our link tree, it's in there. If you need it, just message any of us. We'll hook you up. But Logan I, who's now in the Discord, Logan I 54, left a 5-star rating on Spotify. We've enabled Spotify reviews through the use of this forum, aka you just tell us what your review is and we'll read it if you show us that you rated 5 stars on Spotify. Logan said, I love the podcasts, and this is thematically appropriate, and I am thoroughly enjoying Cruising for a Bruising. Love your fresh eyes on the game. Shout out Logan.
There we go. Shout out Logan. The reviews are coming in. The reviews are coming in very, very positive for Cruising for a Bruising. Some are saying it's the most popular podcast on the Eurostep Podcast Network. Is that true or not? Who could say? I don't believe there are numbers to quantify it, so we won't look at them. But early reviews are very, very good. So thanks to everyone for listening. Keep leaving the reviews. Andrew will be back next week too, so it'll become more knowledgeable again too. Not that Jordan wasn't.
Wow, shots fired!
But it's different. You were leading. It
was different for sure. It was very different. I'm used to hosting pods with you, Jordan, but not generally about baseball.
Except for that one captured in cellular. That was also on the Cruising for a Bruising.
Andrew hosted that. See, that's okay. But yeah, if you want to listen to. I mean, we're finishing, so we're into plugs now anyway. If you want to listen to a 2.5-hour conversation about baseball movies, Jordan was on. Cruising for Bruising. It's in the feed. If you're on YouTube, you're seeing right now, Jordan is wearing a Win in 6 hoodie.
And now he's taking all of our merch. Off. So if you're on the audio feed, get over to video right now.
Win in 6, Eurostep, Cruising for Bruising, Eurostep Podcast Network, whatever merch you want, gspnstore.com. We've got all sorts of stuff up there through to April 30th. You get 22% off with promo code playoffs22. That Win in 6 hoodie, Jordan, it looks damn good.
It does.
Thank you. I did not make it. I happily bought it.
Which you all should too. Also, subscribe on your podcast player of choice on YouTube if you haven't already. Get in the Discord, buy the merch, subscribe and listen and rate and review to Cruising for a Bruising. Follow us on Twitter. And then I think that's it. So go Bucks, pod random. We'll be back after game 4.